Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Candid Chemie. I'm Libby.
I'm Jude.
I'm Shruti.
And I'm Julia. And today we're going to be talking about our interview experiences, the good, the bad, and the weird.
Who wants to go first?
I guess I can share my interview experience. I'll start with the good. So we start on a good note. So I think this was the first interview I did last year. And I had already been kind of networking with the company and knew some people from other events, and they were all really nice. And I feel like that's what makes an interview like feel really comfortable, when the recruiter and like the person interviewing you are just really nice. Some companies just give those vibes, and some are like more serious. But I think since I already had a relationship with one of the people that I was interviewing with, it went really smoothly, and I felt good coming out of it. It was just like they were just really nice, and I think that made the difference in my nerves and like how it went. And I ended up interning with them last summer.
I'll go next. I'll give a bad one. Hands down, my worst interview experience was sometime in recruiting last year. I went in and had an interview with a company that I was really interested in. I had gone to an information session that they had held. I talked to them at Expo, and I got this interview, was super excited, really wanted it, and I walked in, and the interviewer was fine. He was whatever. And when we started the interview, he started writing down notes and then just immediately took out his phone. And he started texting, and he had it like flat on the table in front of him. And he was texting, and he was scrolling through Facebook. And hindsight is 2020. I should have just walked out and been like, okay, this is not worth your time or my time. But I just kind of sat through the rest of the interview feeling really bad about myself and just watching the time on the clock and waiting for it to be over. Yeah, that was definitely my worst one. Don't let an interviewer degrade you like that. Like, you're worth your own time. It's not necessary to go through something like that. Stand up for yourself is what I have to say, I guess.
Yeah, maybe let's go through some advice we have for like sticking what's normal in an interview and what's abnormal. So, because I feel like no one really tells you what to expect and like what the interviewer's what your expectations for the interviewer should be, because there's a lot of focus on like how your answers should be formatted, what you should wear, like what you should be doing, but the interviewer also should respect you in your time. So does anyone have any like tips or advice on that they want to share?
I think it's important to kind of sense if you're being taken seriously or not. I can share another bad experience. I had like a really horrible experience, and I actually ended up reporting the company, like my interviewer, to the HR of that company. But I didn't do that until after, because it's hard to know what you can say as an interviewee and what is acceptable. Because I feel like, especially your first year of recruiting, you're just grateful to have an interview, so you feel like you have to do everything you can, but it's really the interviewer's job to make you feel comfortable as well. And essentially my experience was I was being very degraded because of being a woman. So essentially I would talk about my involvement with the women in engineering program, or U2 or something like that, a woman's org. And I wasn't necessarily even talking about, oh, we help women. I was talking about the projects I've done being a part of that group. And essentially, the interviewer's response was that, oh, why do you think it's important that we even have women's org? Do you think it's important that your employer supports women? Just basically asking me all these questions that only had to do with me being a female engineer. And I didn't realize at the time that that was very inappropriate. And he essentially said, well, our company does not have any women's orgs, so we have to be one big team, basically saying like, oh, because you believe that women should be treated like nicely in the workplace and have an org or a community, like you're not going to be a good fit. And that just was like, at the time, I was just very confused by that. I didn't know if that was normal. And after interviewing more, I realized that was definitely not okay. So I ended up emailing the HR of that company and telling them my interviewer's name and just walking through what had happened. I believe he even made a reference like calling me like a white lady, like very inappropriate things like that happened. I'm just like, it's the memories are coming back, so I'm adding more as I remember. But just overall, very inappropriate, not focusing on my accomplishments, just focusing on me as a demographic. And I could tell from the first questions I was never going to be seriously considered for this position. I was just there, I guess, because the recruiter I talked to at Expo was nice and I had a good impression from that. But then my interviewee just probably the second he saw me, he had made that decision, and that's on him. That's not on me. But I highly recommend don't be afraid to email HR, email a contact at the company because chances are they will respond, they will be receptive. Like the company responded very nicely to my criticism. I didn't do it in a bashful way. I just said, this is what happened. I don't think this is the look you want for your company. I think this should be changed for the future. And they did end up talking to that individual. So I think it's very important to know that you demand respect and that you shouldn't just allow that to happen. I think if that were to happen again, I would definitely challenge the interviewer, say, I don't believe these questions are appropriate. Can we focus on my accomplishments, not my gender or my race? I don't know if that was a very long tangent, but I thought I should share that experience because it was not fun.
Yeah, I think a
Yeah.
good rule of thumb is just if you feel uncomfortable, you shouldn't for any reason other than like your own nerves. So if the recruiter is causing you discomfort, that's a big red flag because you're interviewing for a company because you're interested in working for them. And if the individuals from that company are making you feel uncomfortable, the company itself has a high chance of making you feel uncomfortable as well. Or like them not disciplining that individual or them even bringing them into their company, it kind of shows that they don't take that kind of stuff seriously. So if you feel uncomfortable for any reason, you should call it out. You should leave the interview. Like you shouldn't take it.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that, I know that it can be really intimidating to challenge your interviewer in an interview. Like, I don't know if I was presented with that situation, like in my head, I'm saying, yes, I could definitely be like, okay, this isn't appropriate. But actually doing that is a different thing. So like Jude did last year, like definitely try to reflect on your interviews and like if something doesn't feel right after, you can go to the company's HR and tell them like your experience because most companies have some sort of like pledge or their values usually center around being an inclusive environment. Most big companies have that ideal, so most of them will take it pretty seriously. Like I know Jude was saying that the person that she talked to did take it very seriously when she reported it.
Yeah, she was very kind, the HR contact. Thanked me for my bravery, which is kind of interesting because I didn't think about what I was doing as brave. That was very interesting because I guess it is in a way like kind of standing up for, hey, this is wrong. But I feel like it's definitely worth it to do it. You don't know if that interviewer has had a history of this. Maybe they just need one more complaint to get them off the interviewing team. So I say it's definitely worth it if you have concerns even if you don't want to make a big thing out of it. I think it's definitely useful to just shoot an email saying this is what happened, and then it's on the company to make that change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also if you aren't being taken seriously and you say something in the interview, if you really feel that it's the questions are uncomfortable and you aren't being taken seriously, you're probably not going to get the job because that interview has already made that decision about you. So standing up for yourself and saying, hey, like I don't think that these questions are appropriate, at that point is probably not like hurting your chances of getting a job.
There's a reason they're not taking you seriously. So you might as well stand up for yourself so that they take the next person seriously and that you can maybe help somebody else. I think that's good advice of just making sure that like our voices are heard. We have experience and we all bring different skill sets and ideas, and it's important to remember that and remember that we have value going into interviews and even coming out of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, as Shruti was saying, like it does show you a lot about the company, like how their interviews feel. So, I mean, it's just as much of a fit for on your side as it is for them choosing you on their side.
And hopefully this is a situation that no one has to deal with. But I think it is important because it's something that is not often talked about, is that it's not on you if an interview goes bad necessarily. It can very easily be on that interviewee just not being a good interviewer. I guess now we can kind of talk about if an interview does not have any strange, inappropriate things happening, how would we, I guess, prepare for that or more common things?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I mean, I would say the first thing to do before your interview even starts is to do some research on the company. And some companies I've heard will like not quiz you, but be like, what position specifically are you looking for? Or like, where do you want to work? And if you don't know that company's locations or what positions are available, it can kind of show that you didn't do your research. So I would definitely recommend that. And then also if you do research like outside of that and you find something that you're passionate about that lines up with what they're doing, you can always bring that up in the question and answer portion at the end of the interview. So that like you show them that you are so interested that you've taken the time to research. Do we want to go over the normal like how an interview goes, like from start to finish, like what happens? Because I feel like we didn't really touch on that. And that
Yeah,
can kind of be
definitely. And this is for a behavioral interview. That's the most common interview, I would say, for engineers. That's what we're going to focus on.
does someone want to define what a behavioral interview is? Because I feel like I didn't know that when I was coming into college.
I don't even know what the definition of a behavioral interview is. I just know that I should answer the questions in the STAR format.
Mm-hmm.
So a behavioral interview kind of it's like you're asked questions about different situations that have happened and how you responded to those situations. So examples of that is tell me about a time that there was a conflict on your team and you resolved it. Tell us about a time that you worked on a team. Tell us about a time when you showed leadership. And so Libby was talking about you answer those the STAR format. So Libby, do you want to tell them what the STAR format is?
So it's situation, task, action, result. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
As you're answering the question, you should cover each of those topics. So first, when you're talking about a time you faced a challenge, you set up the situation and what was happening, and your task is what you needed to make sure happened and what the challenge itself was. The action is what you did to overcome the challenge, and then the result is what ended up happening in the end.
Yeah, and I've always been told that you want to focus mostly on your actions and your impact because the context can be important to set the stage, but they don't really care what the problem you were given is more than like how you responded to it because they're interviewing you, not the problem you faced.
Yeah, it can be any situation, even if it's not like directly applicable. If you can make that connection, they just want to hear about the skills you have that you could then apply. So it could be a very tiny task like, oh, my PowerPoint broke down. But if you walk through like everything you did, how you had a backup, how you always plan for things, like kind of broadening the scope of that situation so they can make it very clear, like, oh, she has these skills to then apply to this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Another non-star question a lot of companies like will start out with or maybe end with is asking you like why you want to work for this company or this industry. So like Julia kind of touched on in your research, I would also do research into maybe the industry that they're in and why that interests you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I know Jude last year was telling me we were discussing interview questions that we got, and that one came up. And she told me the answer that she gave for a company, and I thought it was really good because she didn't compromise her stance, but still gave like a really like positive answer. So it was in the oil and gas industry. And we all know that oil and gas is not the best for the planet, even though some oil and gas companies are transitioning to more renewables and less impactful things in the environment. But Jude's answer to that was, I want to work for oil and gas because they have the power to make a lot of big decisions and they have the resources to make those big decisions. And I want to be involved in that. And I felt like that was very true to her beliefs and not saying like, I love oil and gas, but really preserving her own morals while still talking about it in a very positive way, which I thought was a really good answer.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, and I think that's important is like speak your truth, but do it in a way that doesn't feel like you're attacking a company because you do want to work for them. So thank you for that. I appreciate the compliment.
Do we want to I think we still didn't run through like start to finish, like how long an interview is, what happens in it. So, I mean, I can break that down really quickly. So usually it's like 30, 45 minutes, depending on a company. I don't think I've ever had one like go over an hour or anything for just a behavioral. So you get there, you usually have to wait a little bit. Okay, this is for an in-person interview. For a phone call, it would be a little bit different. You'd probably not really have to wait very long. You go in, you introduce yourselves, or you say like, good to see you again if you've already met that person. And you usually sit down. It's always good to bring a copy of your resume if you're going in person, because sometimes they won't have it. So you can pull it out and be like, hey, like, do you need a copy of my resume? It always looks more impressive if you come prepared like that. Then you'll do some introductions, and they'll start out with questions about, usually like, tell me about yourself. That's a very common first question. So you kind of want to have that down on who you are. And then they'll jump into those behavioral questions that you need the STAR format to answer. And then at the end, most companies do a Q&A. So if you have any questions, you definitely want to have some questions. I think it just looks like you didn't do your research if you don't have any questions.
Definitely try to avoid questions like that are already listed on the website. So if you ask what's the start date and it's in the job description, that tends to look a little bad. But you could ask things like, which location would I be working in, if they list multiple. Like, there's a fine line between the two. I guess I can talk about too. Most of the interviews I've done have been remote, so like either on a phone call or like through HireVue or something similar. So they're generally pretty much the same as Julia was saying, except you don't travel, obviously. You get to choose your location. So just like any other like Zoom call or anything, you want a plain background behind you so it looks professional. And then you just answer the questions just like in person, but it's pretty much the same.
The hardest part about answering the questions online is there's nobody to bounce things off of. Like, say a sentence and you think it was witty or a little bit funny, you kind of want somebody to give you a reaction, and it's hard to not have anybody say anything, and you just have to keep talking and keep telling them about yourself or the situation.
There's definitely different types of these remote interviews though. So like the one Libby was talking about, that's more of like a HireVue type thing where they have pre-recorded questions, or they just have written questions for you to read and then you verbally answer them. So those are the ones where there's nobody to bounce things off of because they just kind of review it at a later time. But then there's also like phone calls. With those, you don't get the benefit of seeing the person, but you still can hear like the changes in their voice and you can still bounce things off of them. And then there's also like Skype interviews, or I guess Zoom interviews now. And those are, in my opinion, the best because you can still kind of get the personal interaction and bounce things off, and you have a face to speak to instead of a video camera.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you're doing like a video interview like on Skype or Zoom with somebody, with a real person, definitely wear like business professional like top to bottom, because if you have to like get up or something to plug in your computer or close your door or something, like you don't want to get up and then them see you wearing like your pajama shorts like on the bottom. It's probably
That
not the best look.
happened to me once actually. Like I was doing a Skype interview and I guess my headphones like that they couldn't hear me that well. So I had to get up, but like I couldn't. I was wearing like leggings, which isn't like that bad. Like if they were plain black, so it would have been fine. But I kind of had to like shimmy to the side because I didn't want to risk it. I was like, okay. Mental note for next time to actually go all in and dress completely professionally.
I think the benefit though, like of all of everything going online recently, is that we've all gotten a lot better at having online interaction. So, I mean, I know I would have been more worried last year if I had a Zoom interview or a Skype interview, but this year it kind of feels normal to just meet up with people on Zoom. So I think everyone has the benefit of that for this round of interviews and recruiting. Do we want to talk about weird stories? Because I definitely have a weird one.
Go for it, Julia.
Okay, so last year went to Expo and talked to this company pretty briefly. They were a chemicals company, and I just went to them really because they didn't have a line. So then about maybe a week later or so, I got like an offer after applying online on the ECAC website. I got an offer for an interview. So everything seemed normal, did my normal research, went to the interview, and it was it was really funny. So went in there, and my interviewer was very enthusiastic. Like, he was very like over emotive, like very enthusiastic, and I was like, okay, this is going to be like a good interview. And the first thing he says to me is like, hi Julia, like I remember you, but you might not remember me. And basically, like, I didn't talk to him at Expo, but he was so sure that like I was the person he talked to, and he was like, you just stood out so much. And I was like, we never, like, I know I talked to the other guy, so I don't know how. Like, he was talking to somebody else when I went up to the booth, and I talked to the young guy. There was a younger guy and an older guy, and I talked to the younger guy. So, and he was like talking to me like he knew who I was, and I know that we'd never met. So it was just funny from the start. And then we go through the interview, and he was just really just hyping me up the whole time. Just like, wow, this is so impressive. Like, you're only a sophomore. Like, and just the entire time, like, hyping me up like I've never been hyped up before. And then at the end, he's like, what are you looking for? Like, an internship or a co-op? And I was like, I'm looking for an internship. And he was like, well, we only give internships to juniors, but next year, like, definitely come back. So basically, like, and when I applied for an internship. So he interviewed me knowing that he wasn't going to give me an internship, but like for next year. It was just a very like funny experience, and like made me feel good afterwards because he was just so enthusiastic about everything I said. And he was like, I can't give you an offer this summer, but next summer we need to stay in contact. Like, it was just really funny. And one of my roommates last year also had pretty much the exact same experience. And we were both just laughing about how he said the exact same thing to both of us, like just hyping us up, telling us like 2021, like, you have an internship. It was just really funny and like a good experience, but also weird because I've never heard of another company interviewing people for an internship they know they're not going to give them.
There was the company that reached out to Jude and offered her an internship, and then when did they realize that you?
Oh, it was like, yeah, they reached out to me to interview. So I signed up. Everything was going smoothly. Then the recruiter emails me, like, oh, I just like read your resume. You have to be a junior to apply. And it was a whole mess because there's like a certain window with which you can like get rid of your interview on ECAC. And if you don't go to a scheduled interview, you can get like barred from ECAC. So I was like kind of panicked, and like I was like, ah. It was very frantic because I thought they would have read my resume like before extending an interview offer. That was very strange. But I guess that goes to show you it's really a lot of luck with these things, because that means they probably didn't actually read my interview. So I feel like it's a very good learning moment of like, oh wow, like it's really, a game of chance. But it all ended up okay. I had to like go to the ECAC office though, and like get them to delete the interview. It was very confusing because they're like, wait, you want to like get rid of an interview? And I had to explain because they were very like, they didn't want me to cancel it. And I was like, I've been told to cancel, like, I'm not choosing this. I've been emailed. So I had to like show the lady the email. It was a whole thing, but it all ended up okay. I wasn't barred from ECAC, but it was very strange. So I guess next time I would look more carefully at the years, but I don't know. But then again, it's like they could say they're only hiring juniors, but if you're a good candidate and you're a sophomore, they could give you the job. So it's very hard to know when they're going to actually hold you to that or when they're going to interview everyone.
Yeah, I think it definitely just depends on the company. But I mean, it doesn't hurt to apply. Like, it should be on the company to screen you to see if you're a good candidate. So, I mean, just goes to show they have a lot of candidates to look through. So they're not perfect, and they do make mistakes. And they think they think they've met you before and they haven't. They like think you're a different year than you are. It's all a game of chance and luck. So you just have to stay positive throughout the whole thing and try your best, but know your worth.
But I feel like these are all the one-offs. Most of my interviews are just very average. Like, I walk in, I tell them about myself, we have a fine conversation to good conversation, and then I walk out and I'm like, okay, we'll find out in 2 to 3 weeks. And then there's obviously also the few interviews that are really amazing, and I have great conversations with the recruiters, and we keep in contact whether or not I get it, and I ask them for advice and things like that. So every interview is totally different.
Do you guys feel like interviews that you came out of feeling really good, like you kind of had a sense of if you were going to get a position, or did you think it was really random for you?
I don't know. I kind of had like a feeling with because I got 2 offers last semester, and they were definitely like the interviews I felt the best about. One of them was like a 2 round, and after like the first one, I was like, oh, I did that if I just like perform mediocre. I don't know the word. If I did average on the second round, I felt like I was gonna get the job just with like how nice they were being. And I could tell like what they wanted in a candidate, and I could tell I had all of that. And just like the questions I asked at the end of my interview, like I didn't think they were exceptional, but like the way they responded, like they seemed very excited. So it's kind of, but that sounds very cocky, but I definitely had like somewhat of a sense like, oh, even if I don't get it, I definitely still did well. I'm sure they will like keep me in mind, or remember my name. So, but I don't want to say like if that interview went well, you're definitely gonna get it. But I think it's like you can definitely sense when you've done a good job and you've done all you can, which I think is what you should be the most proud about, regardless if you get a job out of it or not.
I definitely agree. I feel like I kind of had a feeling that I was going to get an offer from certain interviews, and a feeling that I definitely should not get an offer from another interview. It was a company that I didn't really want to work for, but I thought it would be good like interview practice. And when they were like, why do you want to work for this company? Oh, my answer was so bad. But I think like I kind of had a feeling like I definitely wasn't getting that one. But I guess if you have a prior relationship with the company, you can also kind of feel out if you're gonna move on in the process or not.
I would say for me, maybe I have really bad intuition, but I can walk out of an interview and be like, oh yeah, that was great. And then just never be contacted again. Like try and reach out to the company and they don't respond to me and things like that. Or I can walk out of an interview and be like, that was not the best, and then make it to the second round. So I don't know, maybe I'm just not good at judging how I actually do in interviews, but of the offers I've gotten, only one of them I was like, oh, for sure I got this. And that's because they offered me 15 minutes later. Like it was just a really weird instance. So
yeah, I definitely think it varies. It's like not just you, like it's also the company, because you don't know how many other people they're interviewing. You don't know like what the applicant pool looks like. Like I was applying for a job freshman year, and they told me that it was like geared toward like freshmen and sophomores, and then a junior ended up getting it. And I was like, there's no way I could have competed with somebody that has that much more experience than I do. So I feel like it's like you kind of have some intuition, but at the same time, like you don't know the company's situation. And that's like something important to remember.
They all have different processes. Like another one of my interviews, I interviewed with one team, and they were like, you didn't get it, but we liked you, so we're gonna like let you interview for another position. So I was like, oh, if they're kind of like basically making up a position so they can hire me. That was kind of why I was like, oh, I'm probably gonna, if I just like do the same type of interview as I did before. But that's like depending on the company. Some might have a very like round one we do this, then we make our cuts. Round two we do this, then we make our cuts. It can be something like that, or it could be something a lot more fluid, like, oh, we like these people, we'll find places for them. Or there could be like, we only have these many positions and we're kind of doing like a college application process where we need to like make cuts and then fit these roles. So it all depends. We're just kind of, I don't know, we sound like a broken record, but it's true.
and it's hard to know how many people are interviewing for a position, because there was one position where I walked into the first round of the interview and he was like, yeah, we had about 500 people apply and we're interviewing 100. And I was like, okay, that sounds reasonable. Sure, whatever. And then I made it to the second round and it was fine. And I made it to the third round and they're like, yeah, so we're hiring one intern. And I was like, out of the 500 people, you're hiring one intern for your whole company for this summer. And they were like, yeah, that's what we do every year. And it was just very normal to them. But I guess I didn't realize how small of a company they were, but they weren't. They were a very like mid-sized company, but they just wanted one intern. And it was just a very weird, like, I wish I had known that before I went through the 3 rounds of this.
Yeah, that's rough. I feel like companies should be more transparent about, I guess they can't necessarily be super transparent, but I wish that they were more transparent about what their process looked like, because you just don't know. It's really easy to get like frustrated with the process. I mean, not to call out Jude, but last year she was not sure about like getting an offer, and she was like frantically applying to a Maymester because she was so worried. And then
Within
like the
24
next
hours,
week,
I had done everything for the main mess, like reached out to like a professor, got them to write the thing, wrote essay. Like it was, don't do that. Don't panic, because companies also have very different like time windows. So yeah, don't panic like I did, and then end up wasting
the next week,
$70.
I think she got like 2 offers.
Yeah, it was insane. It was that just shows you it's like luck and randomness.
Yeah, I'd say luck is a big part of it. Like last year, I had just probably the worst recruiting year. It was worse than my freshman year, and I was a sophomore.
I
And
think Libby just had the worst luck
it
ever.
truly, like everything I would walk into, something bad would happen. And it was just kind of one thing after another. And I walked into recruiting this year and I was like, I don't know if I can do it again. I don't know if I can go through what I went through last year. And it's already been like 10 times better. And we're not very far into recruiting. We're still at the very beginning of the school year. So don't lose hope just because one year goes really badly. Thank you for listening. And if you have anything you want to let us know, if you would email us at texasuchu@gmail.com. Thanks and have a great day.